So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to paint this whimsical marigold flower bouquet. As usual, you can follow this video with any brushes you want, but I'll list the exact ones I'm using in the description below. So as you can see, I've already got the sketch placed in here. I've just placed it up here as the top layer and then set it to multiply. And you can download this same sketch for free in the description below. And to start painting, I'm going to select a blank layer down here, and I'm going to start by painting the flowers first. So for that, I'm going to grab the abstract round brush, and I'm going to use a very saturated orangey yellow tone like this. And I'm just going to sort of fill in the flower head here just by sort of spiraling out from the center. And that was all one stroke. I'm going to go over it again to make the color a little bit darker. Next, I want to make the center here a little bit more orange. So for that, I'm going to grab the selection tool set to freehand. I'll just select the center, then I'll feather it out, hue, saturation, and brightness, and I'm just going to mess around with this for a minute and try to make the center of the flower sort of fade to a reddish orange tone. Next, I want to add some details of the petals of the flower, and I'm going to sort of draw those on, and those are going to be on their own blank layer above the flower. For the brush, you could use any kind of pen brush, but I want something scratchy, so I'm going to go to the drawing tab and use the little pine. For the color, I think a sort of orange tone like this will look good. And I'm going to start in the middle, just creating this sort of line detail like this. And I'm varying the pressure quite a bit, so sometimes I'm just barely touching the screen. And then other times I'll press much harder. And that's because I want there to be a lot of variation in the boldness of the line. And the reason I did these sort of line details on their own layer is because I want to adjust the opacity. So first, I'm going to set the transparency mode to multiply. Then I'll lower this whole layer to 0 and slowly raise it back up just until those line details are visible, but not 100%. There we go. And once you're happy with how it looks, go ahead and merge the line details together with the flower layer. Now you could repeat this same process again for the other two flowers, but I think I'll just duplicate this flower. So for that, I'll just duplicate the layer like this, and then move each layer into position using the arrow tool. Now to make them look different, you can rotate them and warp them as well. Now for this bud here, there's a little bit of a trick. It's going to fade from the stem to this flower material just like it's starting to open. So I want this exact color and this exact pattern. So what I'll do is I'll just duplicate one of the flowers. I'll move it into position, just there, kind of lining it up on the end of the bud. There we go. Then I'm going to grab the eraser brush, and at a pretty large size, I'm going to erase all the major kind of unnecessary parts of the flower here, and then I'll switch to a smaller brush size and kind of refine the end. And it's not perfect, but I like how it looks. I did do my best to sort of erase within the pattern of the flower petals, just so it looked more natural. If you wanted to, you could also paint this separately as well, using these same colors again. And with all the flowers finished, we can move on and paint the stems and the leaves. And those are going to be on their own layer, but I'm going to place it below all the flowers. For the color, I'm going to try to do this in a sort of deep olivey green tone. And then for the brush, I want to use something smooth. So I'm going to go back to the watercolor kit, and I think I'll do all this with a smooth round. And for the stems, it's pretty straightforward. I'm just going to use a very light pressure starting from the bottom. And then when I start to get close to the flower, I'll press harder and harder, so it kind of flares at the end. Now for the one with the bud, I need to be a little bit more careful. I'll start from the bottom as well, and at the top I'll flare it out, and then kind of scribble around to fill in the shape here. And now for the leaves, I'm going to do these on the same layer that I did the stems on. I'm just going to use this brush at a little bit of a smaller size, and I'm going to start at the end with a very light pressure. I'll press harder to flare it out, then light again, and I'll go all the way down to the stem. And then for the leaves, I'll do a similar thing and just kind of taper it off like that, and then immediately go into the leaf that's right on the other side. Now at this point, if you look closely, you can see the flowers are a little bit transparent and the stems are showing through. Don't worry about that for now, because I'll show you how to fix this later on. Now once the stems are sort of roughed out like this, I want to give them a little bit of an interesting texture in a pattern. And I'm going to start by just going over them again using the same color and the same brush. And I'm still using this at the smaller size I did the leaves with, and I'm just going to sort of dab it around to darken everything. Next, I want to add a sort of scratchy line texture on the stems as well, sort of similar to what we did on the flower. So just like with the flower, I'll make a blank layer above the stem. I'm going to change my brush back to the little pine. I'll use a slightly darker version of my stem tone, and I'm just going to go all over the stems and create a scribbly texture like this, but I won't do this on the leaves. Now, just like before, I want to adjust the kind of strength of this effect. So I'm going to set the layer of these scratchy lines to multiply, and then I can adjust the opacity until it looks right. There we go. And then I'll pinch and merge it together with the stem. So at this point, once the stems are pretty much finished and they have their texture, I like to clean everything up using the eraser brush. And this one is set right now to the fine liner pen. And the first thing I'm going to do is kind of chop off the bottoms of the stems to make them flat. And then after that, I'm going to fix the transparency issue by just erasing the stems wherever they're sort of going behind the flower and showing through. Another thing I like to do to the stems is sort of correct the color. This might not be the case for you, but I feel like they often turn out kind of slightly the wrong shade of green. So I'm going to adjust it right now. So right now they look a little bit bluish. So I'm going to shift the hue and try to make them a little bit more yellow. And once you're totally happy with how the flowers and the stems look, I recommend merging all the layers for those together onto one, and then make a new layer, put it below the flowers, and this is where we can start painting the glass. And to make this glass easier to see, I'm going to turn off the flowers here just for a minute. For the brush, I'm going to use the abstract round, and I'll choose a very light greenish blue tone for the glass. And at a large size, I'll just roughly fill it in like this. Then I'll lift off my brush, shrink the size a little bit, and just kind of go around the perimeter. I want to create a sort of dark edge. I think that's not quite dark enough, so I'll change the color. There we go. After that, I'm going to switch my brush to the water blender. And I'm going to use it to just pull some of that dark edge just a little bit towards the center. But I won't do this everywhere because I want there to be a few hard edges left. Next, I want to cut everything back so it matches the sketch. So I'll grab the eraser again, which is still set to the fine liner pen, and I'll just use this to clean everything up. After that, I want to add a highlight to kind of show the top of the water. So I'm going to do that with the selection tool set to freehand, and I'll just select this area. Then I'll go to hue, saturation, and brightness, and I'll just raise the brightness a tiny bit. Now it's optional, but if you want, you can give this a sort of scratchy outline, sort of matching the style of the flowers and the leaves. So for that, I'll make a blank layer above the glass. I'll choose a slightly darker version of my glass color. For the pen, I'll go back to the drawing tab and use the little pine. And I'll just use this to outline everything. And there we go, that looks pretty good. Now to make this outline stand out a little bit more, I'm going to go to the hue, saturation, and brightness, and I'm just going to increase the saturation. There we go. And then once you're happy with how it looks, go ahead and merge the outline together with the glass. And with the glass finished, we can move on and start finishing up this illustration. So for that, I'll switch the flower layer back on, and I'll switch off the sketch. I don't need it anymore. And I'm going to make sure the flower layer is selected. I want to add a sort of diffraction effect where the stems here are going into the water. So to do that, I'm just going to grab the eraser brush, still set to the fine liner pen, and I'm just going to erase the stems kind of at a midpoint in the water. Then I'll erase it down all the way to the edge of the reflection. After that, I want to shift these over just a little bit. So I'm going to grab the selection tool set to freehand, and I'll just select those. Then I can grab the arrow tool and just move them over. Another thing you might want to do is make the stems a little bit brighter when they're underwater. So again, I'll grab the freehand selection tool, just select the bottom ones, and this time I'll just brighten them. Now where the stems are overlapping on the rim, just grab the eraser and then erase a path. And at this point, the illustration could be done, but I think this would look really nice if I skewed it, and that's really easy to do. Just go ahead and merge everything together onto one layer. Then you can grab the arrow tool, set it to Distort. We'll zoom out here. And I'm going to grab this blue node up here, and this will let me shift the whole illustration to the left. Then I can grab the green node, and this will rotate it, and I'm going to rotate it a little bit back to the right. And this is definitely a very subtle kind of stylistic thing, but I really like how it looks on simple illustrations like this. And that's pretty much the whole process. As you can see, I did end up painting on some simple ladybugs just to add more character. I feel like this happens to me a lot, but after I finish a simple painting and sort of take a break from it, I'll come back later on and see it with fresh eyes, and usually I'll add on a few more small details. If you like this painting style, here are 2 more whimsical illustration tutorials I think you'll love to watch next.